All right, Wednesday. Let's do this thing. So, the first thing is people in history. We talked about each one of these individuals Ramses the second of the New Kingdom and Hatshepsut of the New Kingdom. I'm going to read this aloud for you. It says, for Ramses, the long reign of Ramses II brought a variety of changes in Egypt. During the early years of his reign, he fought against the Hittites to regain control over land in Africa and Western Asia. After a decisive battle around 1274 BC, Ramses II claimed victory for Egypt, but signed a treaty that divided the land between the Hittites and the Egyptians. First peace treaty in world history after the Battle of Kadesh. He also married a Hittite princess. As part of the agreement, he undertook numerous building projects during his reign, including the establishment of a new capital city. Ramses II also built many grand temples, such as the Ramesseum of Thebes and also the Temple of Karnak. Question is, do you think Ramses II was truly victorious over the Hittites? Explain. Well, if you have to sign a peace agreement, I would say no, because that means that, and he divided the land equally, that means that there's had to be something in there that made it some kind of a draw. Uh, so I would say no, he didn't have complete victory because he would have taken over the Hittite civilization. Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut was the daughter of the Pharaoh Thutmose I. She married Pharaoh Thutmose II. When he died, Hatshepsut assumed the full power of Pharaoh. Statues show Hatshepsut clothed and bearded as a king would be. Hatshepsut's reign was a prosperous one. She exercised her power by increasing trade and completing ambitious building projects, including the Temple of Deir el-Ban on the west bank of the Nile River at Thebes. She was uh, succeeded by her stepson and nephew Thutmose III. And if you remember us talking about that, he destroyed any kind of uh, artifacts or statues of her, and they had to actually bury her in a secret chamber afterwards. Why do you think Hatshepsut had herself depicted as a man rather a woman? Women were second class citizens in most every civilization in ancient times. So, for to have a woman leading a country and a woman actually ruling over men was very, 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 very rare. So, she wanted to do something to possibly depict herself as powerful and somebody who could sustain power. So, that's why I think she dressed like a man instead of a woman. She had a lot of pressure on her to be a good ruler, especially being the first female pharaoh. Two parts to this one preparing for the afterlife. You got a picture here of the sarcophagus, the canopic jars we've talked about. Remember, we mummified a peach. Buried with some of the personal items, you have idols representing servants. I'm reading the burial of the wealthy Egyptians down here. It says, the tombs of many wealthy Egyptians were low, rectangular mud bricks and stone buildings called mastabas. These wealthy Egyptians would spend years, even decades, planning and preparing for their own tombs. They would choose a site as close to the pharaohs as possible, arrange for a workman to prepare the tomb, and hire artisans and artists to stock it with items they needed and wanted for the afterlife. Didn't talk a whole lot about the people besides the pharaohs. And then we have the Great Pyramid at Giza for Khufu. And we looked at a slide of this in my class of the burial chambers and what that looked like. We watched a video of how the pyramids were built. So the majority of Egyptians cannot afford elaborate funerals as the upper class. Most, including farm workers and laborers, were merely wrapped in cloth and placed in individual or common graves. The afterlife was of great importance to the Egyptians at all levels of society, so relatives might leave some food and simple objects with them. That way, the dead would be comforted by familiar things. Making inferences. How was the class structure of ancient Egypt society reflected in its funeral practices? Well, the wealthier you are, the more elaborate tomb you had. Obviously, the Pharaoh had a huge pyramid built for him during the Old Kingdom. If you remember, we watched in a video how a lot of the common people were just buried out in the desert, uh, and their body was mummified naturally by the desert arid air. So, the wealthier you are, the more elaborate tomb you had. Comparing. How was the ancient Egyptian view of death similar to or different to from views of death today? Well, living in Western Kentucky, we are living in a region called the Bible Belt. So a lot of people believe in the afterlife. So saying that there is a common belief in the afterlife, uh, really in all religious beliefs. Big difference is most afterlives today don't believe you take things with you. They believe that you store treasures in heaven versus store treasures here on earth. So a lot of people didn't believe that they needed things with them in their burial tomb. All right, the Hittite Empire. As some of you would call it the Hittites. Man, that was. Whenever y'all did that, I was just shaking my head. I mean, the Hittites. All right, number one. Which cities were located in the Hittite heartland? So let's look at the key here. And the darker green is going to be the Hittite heartland. So I really don't do my best to pronounce these. Hattusas or Hattusis is going to be one of your main cities there. The one that starts with a Y, your guess is as good as mine how to pronounce it. And the one that starts with an A, your guess is as good as mine to pronounce it. I have no clue how to pronounce those. Number two, what route did the Sea people take into the Hittite Empire? What route did the Sea peoples take into the Hittite Empire? So let's look at the arrow there in the key. They took a route from the Balkans across a part of the Black Sea into the Hittite Empire. And then looking at a primary source here, the Phoenicians, who gave us the alphabet. It's hard to separate the Phoenicians' cultural accomplishments from the economic accomplishments. The sophisticated ships took them far off lands, spread their alphabet as well as trade goods throughout the Mediterranean. So here's some of the Hebrew, Phoenician, and Latin alphabets. It says here, why is the Phoenician alphabet important to our society? Well, without the Phoenicians giving us an alphabet, other alphabets throughout history would not have been established. Therefore, it's going to be harder, much, much harder to communicate and write. Number two, why would there have been ancient bilingual documents and markers, as you can see here, this primary source? Well, you had to have something to interpret the language. Of course, we talked about the most important one of those being the Rosetta Stone that taught us to read hieroglyphics. This here taught us how to read the Phoenician alphabet from ancient Greek. So, to understand other languages, especially people trading in ancient times, they had to have markers to decipher the language. All right, you guys stay safe. I'll have Thursdays up tomorrow. Let me know if there's anything to do for anybody. Be sure to turn in your work for week 3 if you can. You can email it to me by pictures, or you can just take it up to the school. And I hope you guys stay safe.